Hello, I'm Joshua of Milestone Play, and today I have a very special interview to share with you. This interview is with Greg of Lofty Pursuits. Some of you may know Greg from the Lofty Pursuits YouTube channel, where they do a lot of Victorian candy making videos. Others of you may know of Greg from the yo-yoing and juggling communities. For the longest time, Greg was the runner of the World Yo-Yo Championships, and he was also the first producer of acrylic contact juggling balls after the movie Labyrinth made that art form more open to the public consciousness. Now, the interview I wanted to do had a lot of intellectual, poetic, philosophical questions building a narrative that was just wrong. It was just wrong. Instead, the conversation that we got is more of a folklore history of the modern juggling community, the intersections of gaming and juggling and toys, everything from the beginnings of Magic the Gathering and Steve Jackson games and early internet culture before the World Wide Web was a thing. This interview is far more than I could have ever hoped for it to be, and could be the beginning of an anthropological study into this kind of mixed history of geekdom and nerddom. But before we even get off onto anything like that, let's just get into the interview, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hello, I'm Greg from Lofty Pursuits, right there, and I make hard candy.
And I'm Joshua of Milestone Play. I'm a professional game master and circus flow artist, and today we're sitting down for a wide-ranging conversation of all the different things that I do, all the things that Greg does, and just seeing where it goes.
Well, let's start with the origins of flow.
Oh, okay. You're just throwing this right at me, aren't you? So, you have in our correspondence given this idea that you're not too fond of the term flow arts.
No, I just think the name is terrible because it's just doesn't say what it is. It's like go with the flow, I guess that's it. What it is a continuous thing. It grew out of two pieces of art from the United States. One that was invented fairly recently, which is contact juggling, that was invented by Michael Motion, or at least popularized by Michael Motion. There's some evidence that rolling a ball like that dates back to ancient Greece for written references and medieval Europe. But he popularized it in a film called Labyrinth, which came out in the 80s. And he wasn't even credited for it. It was a Jim Henson film. It starred, was it David Bowie? As the what was he, Goblin Prince? And then it made everyone go crazy about it. And then Poi, which developed independently in New Zealand from club swinging, which was the U.S. equivalent. Indian clubs, which was club swinging. And club swinging was so popular as a regular vaudeville act. And juggling clubs came out of club swinging because people would be juggling things that they knew about, like badminton rackets and things like that. And everybody knew what a club was, but it was really heavy. Because it was meant to be swung, it was an exercise thing. So they would hollow them out, and then they became the first professional juggling equipment, which manufacturers, which was Edward Van Wyck in the late 1800s. I've got one of his clubs, followed by Harry Lind, who took over the business in the 19-teens, and he went into the 40s. And that business was passed on to Stu Reynolds, who's still with us, but unfortunately not really with us. I understand he's suffering from dementia right now, and he made it out of fiberglass. And this is one of the first products made out of fiberglass, especially fiberglass epoxy, because he worked at DuPont as a chemist when epoxy was invented. So all this stuff is weirdly connected, the entire technology thing. And then I remember on the internet back in the 80s, somebody was saying, you shouldn't call it club swinging, you should call it poi, and there was a big argument about it because we'd never heard of poi, but we also didn't live in New Zealand, you know. It was club swinging, and the club swingers are out of Atlanta right now, Joyce Howard and jugglers like that. And back in around 1980, this business started under the name Gravity Specific. It's morphed a couple of times in 86 with me and a friend of mine, John Lyons, who are both amateur jugglers. And one of the products I made was a contact juggling ball out of acrylic. Michael Motion actually used a crystal ball. He bought it in a crystal place called, God, I know this, Stardust, which was on Broadway, right off Astor Place. I used to go there when I was a kid. I grew up in New York City. That was one of the first of the New Age stores, and he loved it so much he didn't want to figure out how it would go. And I started making them out of acrylic and selling them. So the first of the crystal contact juggling balls came from me. And one of my first major customers was a guy named James Ernest. That was his stage name. I don't think anyone knows his real name. And he's a game designer that designed An Exploded Cow. He was one of the guys who was involved in the creation of Magic the Gathering. He did Gimme the Brain, Kill Dr. Lucky. He's a huge game designer, an old friend. And when he was 16 living in Seattle, he used to buy these things off me and sell them on the streets when he street performed. And I'd call him all the time, but he was always out street performing, and I'd get his roommate Phil. And just to get even to a different deep dive, Phil and I had a great conversations making fun of James. I don't find out until James moved out of the house that this is Phil Foglio, the cartoonist, who did Phineas Fingers in Dragon Magazine and currently does a long-running online comic called Girl Genius that I love. I actually read the latest page this morning. So yes, I got a good contact for contact juggling and flow arts. Everybody in it I know in the U.S. end of things. Brian Dubé up in New York has really embraced it with his hula hoop stuff.
Now, you continue to push this out to other names, but you do have a history in competitions and conventions and sponsoring them, being managers.
Yeah, well, that was with the World Yo-Yo Competition. I ran the World Yo-Yo Competition from 2000 to 2013. Was it 14? I can't remember now. And I attended the IJA convention, the International Juggling Association convention, from I think 88 or 89 was my first year until like 2010-ish, 9-ish. I used to sell wholesale, and they're still my friends, and I went to Groundhog's Day Juggling Convention in February, hung out with my friends there, so. Yeah, if they're an older juggler, there's about a 90% chance they're a friend of mine.
So, I use the term circus flow to try to hit both kind of the circus arts performers, the flow performers. I don't feel comfortable with either of them. I feel that circus arts gets a bit more into how big and masterful it can be, where flow is very kind of grooving, electric dance music, and I don't fit in either. I know you use
that's
skill
sort
toys.
Of it. I use skill toys. I actually coined the term skill toys, which I find, when I had my mail order catalog selling juggling equipment, yo-yos, I saw how they all fit together, but nobody else did. So I coined the term skill toys, and then a competitor of mine registered skilltoys.com and named his business that. So there's some irony there, and nobody seems to remember this, but there's a lot of things dealing with yo-yos and this sort of stuff. I guess you're right about it. So in 94, I went to England with I was selling the contact juggling balls wholesale. And there was a company in England called the Mushy P in Manchester, who were friends of mine. And there was a juggling store. They had a lot of juggling stores in England because England was a little weird. It's like there were 3 centers of juggling. The U.S., England, and Germany. And England and Germany had bunches of juggling stores, and the U.S. had one specialty. I wasn't even a specialty juggling store because Lofty Pursuits back in '93 sold kites. It did sell juggling, but also sold darts. This was just juggling specific. And I'm trying to figure it out. And England might have had 15 or 20, the Mushy P, Oddballs, Butterfingers, stores like that. Some of them are still in business. Beard was in England. Henry's was in Germany. So they bought a ton of juggling balls off me, and I discovered that it was cheaper for me to fly with it than to ship it separately, so I planned a 6-day trip to England and a break-even to have fun. And of course, this is back before 9/11, so I had a 100-pound suitcase, and I could just tip the porter $100 and somehow it magically got on the plane. So I had to talk my way through customs. They said, "What are you doing with all this?" I said, "I'm teaching a workshop." They said, "For this?" I said, "Yeah, they break like crazy." And so I got to England and I rented a car. They gave me a Fiat Punta, which is sort of like a football. It was a 3-cylinder, partially ceramic engine car that could hit about 120 on the motorway. And I got on the M5 because I flew into Gatwick, and I drove carefully because I was on the wrong side of the road and was screwing with my brain. This was also 8 a.m. in rush hour when my plane landed because it was a night flight, a red eye. So
you haven't slept?
Well, I sort of have. The Brits think I'm crazy because every country distance is measured by the size of the country. So for the British, driving an hour is crazy talk. For us, I'll drive 8 hours to go someplace. If you're in Canada, 20 hours doesn't seem to be nuts. So it really depends on the country. I'm planning on visiting Portugal, and one of the conversations is, it's such a skinny country, is 15 minutes too much? You know, it even happens in cities here. It's like, there are people at FSU, which is a college not far from here, maybe 15 minutes down the road, that say my store is too far away. But they came from Miami, where they'd have to drive more than that to do their laundry. So everything is in perspective with each other. So I'm driving. I get off this interstate equivalent as fast as possible. And I go, I'm taking nothing but right-hand, is it left-hand turns? Yeah, left-hand turns, because not sure on the right hand which lane to turn into. And I end up at a little town. I just want to stop for a second, you know. So I'd driven from Tallahassee to Atlanta, checked in at the airport, left because security wasn't what it is now, got some beers at a local place in Little Five Points in Atlanta called the Euclid Yacht Club that I loved. Went back to the airport and flew to England and slept 7 hours. Because at the moment of plane, traveling is easy for me and hard for my wife. For me, it's like teleportation. I remember something about the takeoff and something of the landing, but everything in between is sleep. I don't care what the flight is, so flights are instantaneous.
I mean, that's very fortunate for you. Some people
it is. It makes it real easy for me to travel. And if it's a 15-hour flight, I sleep 15 hours. It's something to do with the vibration of the plane, and that, you know, in some regards, I'm 5 years old. So I get out. This little town has 4 storefronts. I really remember what they were. One is a liquor store. One is a closed, independent Apple computer repair shop. One is a 24-hour coin laundry, and one appears to be a breakfast place. And I go in, and on the wall there's this giant piece of poster board with a grid on it, with code on it, with number 1 with 3 letters, number 2 with 4 letters. I don't know what it is. 2 rows. Looks like fractional letters. And I ask what number 1 is, and they say eggs with tripe. And I pause the section. And then I ask what number 2 is. They say it's 2 eggs with tripe. And I ask what number 3 is. It's toast and tripe, number 4. Toast, eggs, and tripe. And then the only thing going through my head is spam, 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 spam. And I know where the joke came from now.
Yes.
And I eventually say, can I have 2 eggs fried dry toast? I just don't want to deal with tripe at 8 a.m. in the morning after a flight. And I have it, and I hop back on the interstate. And I drive to Manchester from London, which is, you know, along the M5 up, I think, the M25. I stop at a castle. There's a little sign. You know, we have signs with like a bunch of grapes and an arrow or something like that. They have a picture of a castle.
Just a castle.
Yeah, I go to Warwick Castle. I pay extra. I see the whatchamacallit, the dungeon, the giblet with a bad figure of a man wearing a loincloth in it, and I end up going to Manchester, and they think I'm nuts, having driven from London to Manchester, let alone having driven from Tallahassee to Atlanta, 6 hours. Atlanta, fly to England, England to Manchester. And I was in my 20s, so this was easy.
And all of this is
a way to deliver contact juggling
to
balls.
not do shipping, to just take it.
It was partially because I wanted to spend a week in England visiting all my juggling friends.
So, a bunch of juggling friends there, they have been coming to the
U.S. conventions,
US.
or this was before the World Wide Web. You have to understand that I made these friends. Before the World Wide Web, there was something called Usenet. There were several things. There was a Gopher server. You have to understand how early I was as a net adopter. And it's probably pretty obvious when you look at my domain name. I'm a candy store with a 2-letter domain name.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second. I didn't pay for it. I'm still annoyed I have to because it used to be free back then. Had a lot to choose from. And PD.net was originally Paradigm, and when I did Candy, public displays of confection matched.
So that was just the natural flow of developing forward from...
Exactly. Everything's organic. So, there was a Usenet, which is still out there in some form, was a message board system that was a public forum, nested threads. And anyone could create it with their own group, which made it kind of unruly. And you get it anywhere around the world. And the recs were for hobbies like juggling, and rec.juggling still kind of exists. And I knew all these guys from it. And so the guys at the Mushy P bought up I had a friend who was a teacher at Oxford I visited. I visited Beard Juggling Supplies up in Yorkshire.
Okay.
Oh, that was cool. They lived in their store or their factory was a little barn, 3 stories, not a little barn, but a barn, on the top of a hill overlooking a valley. At the bottom of the valley was a town called Hepton Bridge. which I don't really understand, but it's like the U.S. Walton in its space in English writing history. And I'm in Walton, and I look up. There's a Harrier jet flying down the valley under the height of the mountains in training, which I thought was cool. I ended up stopping in a bar there because I was running early, and I discovered throwing nails. So what they do is they take about 6-inch nails and they drill a hole in the end. They put a dart tip in it, and you put the head of the nail right here between these two fingers and the point right here, and you throw it overhand with a single flip into a small dartboard.
Okay, so you have to pace it out.
You have to eyeball the spin time, but yeah, I mean, I've thrown knives. I had no trouble with it. I still lost, but drinking beer, throwing nails. I mean, it's this real unique thing.
Always safe to drink
in Manchester, I bought a Manchester board, which was a small dartboard that's traditional for that region.
Okay.
Because the original dartboards were ends of logs, and they checked to make cracks, and that was the wedges.
Yeah.
So what they did was they would take an end of originally a log of a tree that went extinct or something. Now they use poplar. They dye it black, they hammer in wires, and you throw literally into the board, but the board will dry out. So to keep it from drying, they put it in water overnight, sometimes beer in a half barrel under the board, and you'd lift it up and hang it during the day, and you put it down to soak during the night. Problem is these things got a little stenchy. They smelled after a while.
That makes sense.
And this is why Cecil boards were invented, which are the modern boards, which are larger in diameter, that are packed grass, originally from England, now from North Africa. And the brand that made it popular was called Nodor. No odor.
I mean, they know their marketing.
But what I'm saying is, I see all of these as connected skills. I don't see a separation. Then I drive up the hill in this little Fiat Punto where my knees seem to be the bumper. And everywhere there are traffic circles. There's no way to hit a right-hand or left-hand turn normally with lights. There's not many of those. And I only saw one stop sign, and this was in the town that was halfway up the hill between this low town and where the barn was, where Beard was. And there are stone walls on either side of the road with sheep in it that sort of look like, really like Shaun the Sheep. I mean, in my memory, years before I ever saw Shaun the Sheep. So there's no way to turn around. And I'm up there, and there's an entire area that's between walls with one cow grazing. And the cow has giant horns. And I got to tell you, I'm a bit sleep deprived. This is my third day of the trip. I spent 2 days in Manchester. Discovering Abraham Lincoln. That's a different story. So I end up seeing this cow. The cow looks at me. I say, those are amazing horns. And then I make the worst mistake of my life. I go, I have a horn. And I honk my horn, and that thing snorts, pulls the dirt, stares at me. I stare at him going, I'm an aluminum foil. I'm dead. I mean, I dented the car leaning on it, and I wasn't this big. And eventually it walks off, and I go up to the Juggling factory.
So I have been to England for a week. It was mainly in London, small trip out to Oxford, and then one day I took a walking tour. Like, I took a train out to Reading, got off, and just walked until I could cross the Thames and walked back. Horrible choice to do on your own. But during that, following the footpaths, which we think, oh, there's public walking areas and there's private property. In England, footpaths will go right through someone's property. You just stay on the path. And I find myself very similar to your car situation. Bowls.
Yes.
Just a field of bowls. And it's like, oh, there was a sign that said I'm supposed to be here, but am I supposed to be here?
Since you're a geek, this story you'll appreciate. So I'm a 2000 AD collector, which is a British comic book which Judge Dredd was in originally. I've got original art. I'm trying to find back issues and go, I'm in England. I'm going to find back issues. And this is back when you could still find them in junk shops. And actually, when I was in Manchester, I found like 4 of the early issues for 50 cents each in a junk shop in the Corn Exchange in the center of Manchester. And I end up, I don't know why we're harping on England, but I got there.
We're here.
But I go to Mega City 1 Comics, and Mega City is the city that Judge Dredd is in. I actually expect to find Judge Dredd comics in there. There are none. They're just American comics in it. But when I'm walking back to the train station, there is a pub called the Inn at the End of the World. Okay. And there's an Indian lady manning the pub with gray hair. And this comes up in a Neil Gaiman Sandman when he does a Chaucer's Tale sub thing. And I'm going, oh, this is the inspiration.
Okay, yeah.
I think that was a wonderful discovery at the time. So back to your questions. I'm sorry,
no, this is great.
We're in flow, no candy, just flow here.
I mean, we might
We'll talk
eventually...
about power tools next.
We might get to candy, we might not, depending on the time. But so you're going through England, going through Europe, going to these specialty stores for juggling. Mm-hmm. You've said that you didn't consider Infinite Illusions. What was the other name?
Gravity specific. This was actually by the time it became Infinite Illusions.
Okay, so
it's only gravity specific for 2 years. I had a partner the first 2 years. We split up. We decided not to use the name again.
Okay, so you never considered yourself a specialty shop.
I considered myself a specialty shop. I considered myself not just a juggling store.
Okay, so more.
So in England. So I asked a friend how England became a juggling center. He said, because of the dole. For you to be the dole, you have to be unemployed for something. People put down juggling instructor. And when there were enough people to put down juggling instructor, the British government, in its infinite wisdom, created jobs for juggling instructors and had free juggling classes all over the country, and you had to take the job if you were offered it, as that was your skill.
Because if you didn't take the job, you didn't get the dole.
And then once there were 50 to 100 juggling classes around the country, there was a market to open up lots of different juggling stores.
That is wonderful.
And then I said, so what about Germany? Is it the same thing? He went, no, they're just competitive.
So your shop had kites and things like that.
And mail order juggling was the big thing. So I started mail order juggling in 86. In 93, I opened the store that I brought the juggling equipment out, and I filled it in with stuff that, since I wholesaled this, I didn't after a short time after this. I would bring in things that I'd see at the trade shows, like kites, stunt kites specifically. I love stunt kites. I'd bring in yo-yos. I was getting into yo-yos at this point. I was into yo-yos in college because of my friend Andrew, but not seriously. And then I went to a juggling convention, and Dale Oliver, one of the great yo-yo masters, actually one of the last living grandmasters of yo-yo, was there, and he taught me how to yo-yo. I started entering yo-yo contests at the juggling conventions.
Okay, so you
which wasn't
gone
crazy,
through and done the contests.
The juggling conventions, the IJA grew out of the International Brotherhood of Magic. There weren't enough jugglers to have their own convention. They took a corner on the magic conventions. When they got big enough, they started their own convention.
Okay.
Well, the yo-yoers, Dale Oliver saw this history and went, well, I can do this with yo-yoing. So he started showing up at the IJA conventions, getting people who were interested in skill toys. And he started having yo-yo contests there, brought it and turned it into the international, eventually the world yo-yo competition. And then in 99, when it was big enough, it was held in Hawaii, and I took it over in 2000, because after all the money lost in Hawaii, nobody wanted to do it again. Mm-hmm. And it's still going. It was in Japan this year.
That's fantastic.
So, because of this in my attic, I had discovered I had 50,000 yo-yos, and I had to do something with them. Yeah, it's stupid numbers of yo-yos. I gotta get rid of them.
You've already used the term geek, referring it to me, but we do have a habit of collecting things beyond our measure.
I collect things. My goal is to collect things that are not expensive because I love collecting things.
You want more and more.
No, I want the hunt. I want it to be hard.
Okay.
I want it to be a challenge. I don't want to just throw money at it, and I don't need to throw money at it if something interests me. Mm-hmm. So back in the day, I used to collect comic books, original art. Nobody cared about original art. They were $10 a page. Mm-hmm. I would find my favorite pages. I have about 30 or 40 pages that are pretty major now, like the first appearance of the new Captain Marvel and the first page that from Longshot #1 showed up on by Arthur Adams and things like that. And then the prices got out of control. It's like I collected 2000 AD because there were $2 an issue for the new issues and there were 50 cents an issue for the old issues. That's not the case anymore, so I stopped buying it. It's also an anthology comic, and I used to like 6 stories in the comic, and it got to the point that I only liked 1. And why are you spending $8 for 4 pages?
Yes.
And then I also collected illuminated manuscript pages when nobody was collecting those. They were like $100 each. And I collected silent movie memorabilia. I'm a big silent movie fan. When there's always a break point where nobody is collecting something and the prices drop. And that was with silent movie memorabilia. That was the moment. It's not anymore. The next generation has come in. I've repeated this and I've got enough to keep me happy. I mean, I've got early lobby cards by from Clara Bow's first and second movies and things like this that are really rare. There was a point where they were dying off, these stars, and they started selling their clothing. So I have I have a blouse and a pair of gloves from Lillian Gish. I have a pair of earrings from Clara Bow. I have a yo-yo that was engraved. They used to make these silver yo-yos from a company called Gorham that you would get in a silver engraving shop that used to be in malls all over the country. I got Frank Sinatra's with a pipe.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It cost me like $30, you know. And things like that I have in my collection that's just weird, but, you know, there. I'm collecting circus posters because the bottom has dropped out of that. My favorite poster that was about, I don't know, this big. It was 42 inches by 29, I want to say. It's a half sheet. It has a light blue background. It has an elephant on it with a clown on the trunk. It was from the 30s. It's like a 20 color separation stone lithograph. It's amazing. You can get a good reproduction 1-to-1 on Amazon for about $200. So you can buy the original for $35.
Yeah,
it's one of those things. I just got a mediocre condition version of it because they made them in multiple sizes. That's 6 feet by 10 feet. I want to put it on the back wall of the store for $100 plus postage.
So there might be an assumption in this question. So please correct me if the assumption is wrong. But it very much seems not only does Lofty Pursuits grow organically, but it follows your passions. But not all of your passions are in the store. Are there certain things that you've struggled to incorporate, like the comics?
No, actually, I try to avoid certain things. I've turned a lot of my hobbies into my business. I turned yo-yos, juggling equipment, toys, food, candy.
So avoiding
those I don't enjoy anymore in the same way that I enjoy a hobby. When you do something for nothing, when you do something when you want to do it, not when you have to do it, it's a lot different. People go, I build furniture. People go, why don't you sell your furniture? It's gorgeous. You could make a lot of money. And the answer is yes, I could. It's great. I'm not going to. Because I'd like to stay sane.
That is something that I'm doing right now. Where being a professional game master, it is different running games as a business and telling stories as a business versus sitting down with your friends. And I want to recreate that experience for people, but there's just something innately different.
By the way, it seems so weird that this is the case. It
is so weird. So
when you consider, I know Steve Jackson personally.
Yes.
I've met Gary Gygax. I started playing D&D with the first edition before the hardbacks with photocopied newspaper articles and chainmail and something else. I have the original Deities and Demigods with Conan in it and Cthulhu.
Do you have is it Wilderness Adventure? It was the overland traversal game you had to play between the dungeons.
No, I don't.
Okay, that might have been.
But I do have Ogre in its original Ziploc bag that was this big and not the big box from Steve Jackson. I know James Zerna. I know all these people, but few of them. I don't know Steve Jackson through gaming. His brother Ken had one of the early dial-up internet connections you could get.
Okay.
And I knew his brother, so I knew him through that.
That is...
my former bookkeeper became the editor of his magazine, Pyramid.
Okay.
My old roommate and best friend Ed contributed to his edition of The Prince of Discordia. There's lots of weird connections here, but not through gaming.
Yeah, it's all... I
remember when James Ernest called me. They were working on a game which became Robo Rally. It didn't have enough money to do it, so they wanted to make a cheaper game to make the money to make Robo Rally. And Robo Rally had art by Phil Foglio, his roommate. So it's everything here is connected. And he said a friend of his came up with a collectible card game, he called it. And he said, this card game, we figured out how to get people, instead of spending the average $25 a year on a gaming system, they'll spend up to $30. He was wrong. He was like $300. And he said, he gave me all these specs for it. I said, what are you calling this? He said, well, we don't have a title. We currently call it Crack for Gamers. And I'm going, no way I'm touching this. I mean, this guy was with the Jim Rose Freak Show. I'm not touching a carny with a cash investment. It was also like a month after I quit my day job in '93 for this.
Okay, that's a risky time.
When it was released, it was called Magic the Gathering.
It did
I
okay.
calculated out how much it would be when it was sold to TSR, my share, but I didn't do it. I don't really regret it, but it's like I still don't get it.
So we have so many spans of time in this. We have the
And I haven't even talked about the candy machine.
we haven't gone back to the Victorian, but we have the Victorian candy, we have the soda fountain, we have the comics, we have the games.
Well, each of these things have a connection to me and to fun. So I started with a mail order business. I needed to move it out of my living room, basically. I was actually doing it in a shed. I was building all the juggling equipment in a 6 foot by 12 foot shed, or an 8 foot by 12 foot shed.
Okay.
I mean, I had power tools and power behind my house. And I eventually couldn't do that, and I needed to get a storefront. I needed to get a place to do it, and I found the storefront that was cheap enough to rent. It was cheaper than a warehouse. It was beat up, but it had a storefront in it. And it also, and this is the important part, it had been a sewing machine repair shop, so it was zoned light industrial.
Okay.
And at that point in Tallahassee, it was very hard to change zonings. It's changed, but it's very hard to change. Actually, it's back to that again. But I found a place that I could set up. So I rented this. The rent was like $300 a month. And in the back, I made juggling equipment all day. And I put these products out front so I'd have a reason for a storefront. And when the doorbell rang, I came out and helped people. And then I went back and built juggling equipment and ate ramen noodles off the hot plate. It was a type.
Because
It was a new
ramen
business.
noodles. That's
Exactly.
you have to do it.
At that point, it was 15 cents a serving. So I did that, and then the store started growing. But the mail order still became a thing, and I discovered having a storefront was important with yo-yos. A lot of toy manufacturers won't sell to you unless you have a storefront.
Okay.
This is back in the day. And nowadays, it's with the world of Amazon, it's not
Yeah,
the
it's
case
different.
anymore, but back then it was the case. So having a storefront was important. And I outgrew this place, and there was a hole in the ceiling they wouldn't fix, and things like that. So I found a warehouse pretty close by, a pretty big one, and rented it. It was not very expensive. And at this point, I was bringing in enough income to warrant it, and I needed a storefront. I got a storefront at Lake Ella, and I moved the store there. And all the storefront had to do was pay its bills for its employees. I mean, the whole object of the storefront was to let me buy things wholesale. Well, let's go to 2010. The world has changed. I was selling on Amazon my yo-yos. I was realizing they weren't buying the yo-yos I was selling. They were buying the next yo-yo in the pile. So say I had a Duncan Imperial yo-yo, had a barcode. Amazon didn't ship my yo-yo. They shipped the next one with the same barcode on the stack. It sort of became this amorphous blob like electrons. They just pulled the next one out. So really what was happening was they were selling from whoever was willing to make the least amount of money.
Yeah.
And I like auctions that raise prices, not auctions that lower prices. And I realized the world had to change, and I went, I'm going to change this to a storefront because my products stopped being products and started being a commodity. And I don't want to sell a commodity. So in 2010, I moved out of Lake Ella, partially once again, management changed there, and just didn't want to go. And I talked to my wife and said, look, if we stay here, this conversation has happened many times.
Yeah.
We will be dead in 2 years, slowly, or I can move and risk it all and possibly have a success. So I moved across the street from where I am now, but I felt the toy store, I really felt that retail toys and games and juggling equipment and flow is a successful business, but we had to give people a reason to shop retail. You see, people used to buy toys for two reasons: their kid's birthday and the kid's friend's birthday. And at a certain age, buying toys for your son's friends was a huge expense and was a huge profit point for a toy store owner. And they were stopping doing that in toy stores because they could just do it in Target instead of, Johnny, let's go to Lofty. Johnny, we're at Target, here's 20 bucks, buy something for Jimmy. And I needed to get them in regularly. And I went, what is in my childhood? Well, I grew up near a soda fountain. We called them candy stores in New York City. They were tiny, they were everywhere. They sold newspapers, they had a soda fountain, they sold toys in season like yo-yos, bounce balls, there were yo-yo contests there. You start seeing the parallels.
Exactly.
And I went, can I do this in High Gourmet and get people to come back after school every week for ice cream? And I did a lot of research. My wife talks about these 6 months that we were doing ice cream experiments every day and was working through books on ice cream. And I don't do this stuff. I don't just say I'm going to open an ice cream store. I start finding books back to the 1800s. I've got a collection of about 60 volumes, possibly one of the best soda fountain histories. And I wanted a soda fountain. Planned it all, I put it all together, I went into a lot of debt, I built the space, I had a lot of help from my landlord, a guy named Bill Crona. He made this happen. And across the street, the modern Lofty Pursuits opened. I had toys on one side of the store, I had a soda fountain on the other to bring them in regularly. So now they'll say, well, we're at Lofty Pursuits, let's buy the toys. It was a profit point that led to added, and then I needed a show.
And that became the candy?
Yes, But first, I was looking at music, and I didn't trust the musicians. Then I was looking at children's books. Okay. Children's books are a weird market. I didn't want to get into it. I didn't think I could make it work. And then I went into candy. I was at a yo-yo contest that I was running, and a guy who made artisanal yo-yo string, and yes, that's a thing, his brother was a candy maker. And he brought candy with an S in it for snack time strings. And I talked to him, and it took me 2 years to hire him, maybe a year and a half. He had a scholarship that was on hold for a local university, Florida A&M, but he didn't have any money to come up here. And I convinced him to quit his old job, come up here. I said, work for me, you'll have a job, I'll help you with this, and I will get all the equipment to make candy. And I apprenticed to an employee for 2 years before he moved on.
That is absolutely wonderful.
He got his business degree, and he moved to another town. And he trained me. He also trained Uri. We were the last two people here. And Uri left me for 5 years and came back. But yeah, that's what we did. And that's where the candy started. And for me, I wanted the candy as a show that could make money to bring people in. I wanted something that people could show off the business with to their friends. Like, where else are you going to see this stuff? But I also saw this as a possibility of going into mail order with it, because now this wasn't a commodity. This was a product. I could concentrate on quality. I didn't have to concentrate on price. I'm never looking at the price of the candy. I'm looking at
the quality
of the candy, and I'm hoping people will buy it for what it'll cost me to sell it.
On the quality of the candy, do you see the candy making and some of the other stuff as an art or a craft?
Yes.
Okay.
It's no different. Both are two elements of it. And art is the creative process, and craft is the quality.
That is a wonderful definition.
So, so I can do welding, I could do sculpture, but when I took sculpture classes, it was kind of fascinating. The other people were trying to, glue together army men or weld something into a shape. I was worried about the weld joints because I wanted to be here in 100 years. I want to make something that isn't just something you enjoy now. It's something that in a generation they'll still enjoy and will last till that point. So quality is part of it. People say they want to achieve immortality through their works. I want to achieve immortality by not dying, frankly. But the immortality of the works require quality and craftsmanship.
The interesting part about that is, with what you might be most famous for online being the candy, that is an impermanent art, and yet the art form becomes permanent.
Exactly, and the videos become permanent. And the memories become permanent. Yeah, that's a transitory art. And transitory art is kind of important to me. Where I discovered that was very young. I actually know the exact date. It was very close to now. It was November 11th, 1976. I'm living in Brooklyn, and I'm off because that's Veterans Day. My mother takes me to the Whitney Museum of Art, where they're doing a Calder retrospective. Mm-hmm. Alexander Calder was an abstract sculptor. He made mobiles, he made stabiles, he made interactive arts. At that age, so that would have been, I would have been 8, I thought of him as a toy maker. Because they really were toys. And they were meant to be interacted with. He had these statues of Josephine Baker, Google it. There were these wire statues that sort of looked skeleton-like, but you were meant to grab their hands, they were in a spring from the ceiling, and dance with them. Uh-huh. When he was alive, he wanted people to interact with the sculptures at the exhibits. Mm-hmm. And I got to do that with one of the Josephine Baker figures, and there was a figure with ceramic bowls and a rubber ball that would bounce around. I was waiting my turn, I never got a turn. And while I was waiting my turn, word came down from around the museum that he had just died in the museum right then. And I just remember there are going to be no more of these. There's going to be no more of his circus. This is part of my circus connection.
Yeah.
He made a toy circus that could be manipulated like puppets and things like that. And I travel the country, and I'm going to start traveling the world to see Alexander Calder stuff, because he was this huge influence in me. But that was the moment I knew the transitory nature of art. Mm-hmm. Art exists for all times, but it also doesn't when it's not being used. The machines that I use, will they wear out? Yes, but they were meant to be used. They should be.
They should be used until they wear out.
Exactly.
You want to care for them up to that point.
And also, I'm not the first owner of these machines, clearly. Mm-hmm. So I have an obligation to care for them for the next generation. So do I own them, or am I just the current caretaker? And this is the philosophy of a lot of what I think.
So on the philosophy, we have the Victorian candy, the Victorian machines moving up through the soda fountains, and You mentioned...
And actually, I built this in the other direction.
You built it in the other direction. We start with the very modern things, the modern juggling products, the modern games, all those game connections you have. There isn't a single time period of Lofty Pursuits. How much of this is reenactment of small points, and how much of
I don't think this is reenactment. This is finding what we've forgotten and bringing it back so we can enjoy it.
Is it nostalgia of a nostalgia of a feeling as opposed to a particular moment?
Oh, definitely. Because early soda fountains were death traps. They were health hazards. Mm-hmm. They would have a bucket of water that they would fill at the beginning of the day, and they just rinse the dishes with it all day. Mostly they were polishing off the dirt. Actually, this is a problem. When the Spanish flu happened in 1918, people were avoiding soda fountains like crazy, so they created the National Ice Cream Institute, and they set down some standards. And this is where 2-compartment sinks first went in, which became 3 compartments, stainless steel surfaces. A lot of this grew out of the soda fountain and the ills of it. And to show that they were safe, they marketed it through something people knew. So in World War I, during the Spanish flu, the Americans lost more people to the Spanish flu than to bullets. So the military came up with something called military sanitization, which was 2-compartment sinks and things like this. Everybody at that time knew the term military sanitization. So they dressed the soda jerks in a white shirt, a military dress uniform, a bow tie, a military overseas cap, but they made it a color that no branch of the military used, white. The soda jerk outfit is advertising for military sanitization during the Spanish flu or just after.
It is just as much propaganda as...
This is marketing.
It's propaganda, just like the, in the silent films, in the 30s and 40s films. It just all goes into the period of history that we were in.
Exactly. So that's what it is. And part of what I do is, I think you're missing something. You see Lofty Pursuits as nostalgia. I see it as one of the only businesses that markets using 5 senses.
Okay.
You go in, you can smell like baking cookies, you can smell the candy being made, you can taste the stuff, you can see the stuff. We have music playing, you can hear the sound of the scrapers going on the table. It's the sight of what you see. Very few businesses can use all 5 senses.
There's the assumption I was making that you corrected. Thank you, sir.
No problem. Happy to do it. And I like to create things, and it allows me to do it. I paint portraits of my employees that are on the wall of the store. I have a workshop, and this is something most people don't know about. How do you take care of candy equipment from the 1800s? What if something breaks? Across town, I've got 3,000 square feet of workshop. I have a full cabinet shop with really big tools. I have a full machine shop. I have a welding area. I have a blacksmithing and smelting area. I have a vinyl cutting area. I have a 3D printing workshop. I have an electronics bench. I have my programming and audio area where I remake the videos and I write the code for the website. Yes, I can program in bunches of languages. So on one of my videos, I showed making a part for a machine that everyone went wild that I actually made a thumb screw from scratch. It was like, I couldn't find one the right size. I wasn't showing off. It was weird. But I made it. And, people go, how many of these have you made? Well, one. That's
the one I need?
The one I need. It's like, this is just how you make stuff. So Wired Magazine was coming in. Yeah, I'm not letting him talk.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Wired Magazine was coming in last week, and in a couple of weeks, you're going to see a video. I think it's coming out on December 12th or 13th, of me making a candy feast. It's sort of like the feast I make for Thanksgiving, but smaller, and it's because the new Willy Wonka film is coming out December 15th. And this is reminiscent to the flavors in the bubble gum from Violet, from the original movie. So we have everything from blueberry pie, because that's what did her in, to, I couldn't do roast beef. I did the ham that I do for the Thanksgiving mix, the corn, and I do apple cider that's bubbly. So they have 4 flavors, and they're magical. So you get a bubbly flavor, you get a flavor that really tastes like ham, one that really tastes like corn, one that really tastes like blueberry pie. And I get to Willy Wonka the heck out of it.
That is
But for the back of it, I wanted some Willy Wonka references. On the stockroom door, because people kept on walking into the stockroom thinking it was the men's room, because the arrow goes that direction, the men's room is after it. I put a big sign up which said stockroom 52, what is it? It was sour cream, hair cream, grilled cream, whipped cream, and it's from the movie. I made a reproduction of the image of the movie. One What I want to add is a sound effect. If you listen carefully in the movie, you hear a cow mournfully moo and then a whip crack for the whipped cream.
Exactly.
So at the end of the film, he goes to his office and they have half of everything, half a chair, half a desk, half a statue, and they put a hat on the statue. So this was my latest project at the warehouse. This was a storefront mannequin, so this side was hollow. I filled it in and built an epoxy wall and bonded the heck out of it. And I now have a hat rack.
That is lovely.
And I thought I needed it for the release of the new Willy Wonka film. I'm sure this isn't going to be in the film, but it is going to be in the store.
And you can come see it at the store. Where's the store?
Tallahassee, Florida? I figured you'd tell them this elsewhere.
I mean, no,
The store exists beyond the videos, but the videos are definitely its own space where I get to talk about history, flavors, and smells. And it's kind of fun because everyone enjoys the flavors and smells that they can't smell on the other side of the video screen. I wish they had, I could send scratch-off pads to them or something.
So I have one final question before I return you to your busy day.
Thank you.
You have lofty pursuits, but what separates a lofty pursuit from an extravagant endeavor or a foolhardy fancy?
Oh, you don't know okay. So back in the day, I was selling kites and juggling equipment, and I go, I need a name for this, and I can't come up with a good one. And my mother says, call it Lofty Pursuits. You said this isn't going to succeed more than 3 years, and you sell the kite stuff. It's a good double meaning. I went, great. It's not going to last for 3 years. Any name will do.
So it is a foolhardy
30 years
fancy.
later, exactly. The whole name is. I hadn't thought of it that way. But yeah, the whole name is Foolhardy Fancy, and it's also good because it doesn't say what it is. So when it changed from just a toy store to an ice cream shop, now we're worldwide known for ice cream. We're worldwide known for our candy. We now serve breakfast. A friend of mine makes the joke that in another 10 years, I will be a 1-star Michelin restaurant and an auto repair center. And the warehouse that I bought last year used to be an auto repair center.
So you're right there.
I'm 1 Michelin star away.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Have a lovely, and
thank you much.
Not that he needs the assistance with it, but go check out the videos. The only reason I'm here is because time and time again, come visit us in Tallahassee, Florida.
I do, and because I'm right off the interstate, I get about 5 carloads a day. On a good day, that's 10% of the business. So you guys spend a lot more than my local customers. They'll buy a $4 ice cream. You'll leave with a bag of candy, a game, a notebook. All good. Did I miss any questions?
Oh, we missed many questions. I don't care about the questions. I cared about the conversation.
Good.
And we've had it. So thank you guys, and come visit.
Visit the website, www.pd.net. I like the W's. And check things out. We're going to be doing a candy Christmas loot box soon. We're going to be on Wired's YouTube channel for the second time. And we'll be in the December issue of Southern Living.